My name is Jim Lewis. I am Professor of Religious Studies at Bethel University here in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I have here with me Mai Neng Moua, a Hmong refugee from Laos who came to the United States in 1981 with her family. Her father, who was a soldier with the Hmong who fought on the side of the Americans, did not survive. I want to honor his memory. She's a graduate of St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. She's a writer, a spinner of tales about Hmong culture and life, and in fact, that's what her book, The Bride Price, really does. It's a memoir of an important part of her life and an account of an important custom of the Hmong people. She's editor of Bamboo Among the Oaks, a Hmong American anthology. She's currently working on picture books for Hmong children. And in her day job, she is on the grant staff of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. She lives in Maplewood, Minnesota, with her husband Blanc and her two daughters. Mai Neng, I'm very, very pleased to have this chance to learn from you about the bride price. In the 1980s, I learned a lot about Hmong from students that were who I taught at Crown College. And they told me much about their experience, and that was really my first experience. Tell me something more about yourself, things that you enjoy. Okay.
Yeah, Jim, thank you so much for that introduction and for remembering my father. So the Hmong, as you know, were part of this, what we call the secret war in Laos. And many Hmong died, and that is why a lot of the Hmong people are here in the U.S. So a little bit more about myself. Gosh, you know, I'm married to a wonderful Hmong man. I have 2 children, 2 girls. You know, I have a professional job, 9-to-5 job, and then on the side, I try to be a writer. And so when I grow up, I still want to be a writer. You know, writing stories that feature Hmong stories and Hmong families, and, you know, the need for stories for Hmong kids. So that's why I'm working on some picture books. Yeah. But, yeah, I think that's about it.
The Hmong community here in St. Paul is quite large.
Yes. Yes. St. Paul, Minneapolis probably has the most concentration of Hmong in the world. And you know, Hmong people, a lot of Hmong people were settled in different states, but through secondary migration, you know, we moved to be closer to family. So St. Paul is one of the hubs. St. Paul and Minneapolis is one of the hubs for Hmong people. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, my students at Crown College, Hmong students, were telling me about some conversions that were taking place among the Hmong in North Vietnam. And that began my research on this conversion movement. It began in the mid-1980s, maybe 1987. And today there are somewhere around 300,000 Christians who have taken first steps out of traditional religion and become Christians. And so I've been interested in the impact of Christianity upon Hmong culture. And not only that, but the very interesting rites of passage, one of which is the bride price. And so when I read when I found the title, when I found your book, I read it, and it has been immensely informative to me about something that I didn't know anything about, have had no other source. So could you just describe for us what is the custom of the bride price? What is the bride price? Kind of an interesting name.
Yes, yes. So I make a distinction between the bride price and a dowry. So in a lot of cultures, including the Hmong, when a bride gets married, she gets gifts from family members that are given to her to start her life. So that that is called a dowry. And then the bride price in the Hmong community is money that the groom's family pays for the bride. And it could be a couple $1,000s. There are rumors of $20,000 bride price. But the bride price is I guess, compensation for the economic loss of the daughter. It compensates the bride's family for raising a good daughter. It says that the family wants to marry her. It says that they'll love her and will treat her right and things like that. And it's one part of the big traditional Hmong marriage ceremony. But as a Hmong woman in the U.S., it's a controversial part for me, because although it is not meant to feel like you are being paid and bought for, that's what it feels like. And the fact that, I don't have a father, or the fact that I've had kidney disease, the fact that, maybe I am not from a socially well-off family, all those things impact how much the bride price is. But it is usually the bride's family that will ask for it or not ask for it. And so in my case, because my family is Christian, and we go to church, then I felt like the best way to celebrate this marriage is to do in the church and to not ask for a bride price. To have a big party, to invite both sides of the family to come and celebrate. So I did not want a bride price. And mostly, too, that the bride price has been used against Hmong women, almost like a chain around their neck, It's used to punish them. It's used to force them to do things right, because if you don't, because your in-laws paid for you, then you belong to them, and you need to do things right, or they're gonna send you back home and not want you, and things like that. So I don't know. I've heard about these stories so much that growing up, I decided myself that if I ever married a Hmong man, and I didn't actually even know I would marry a Hmong man, then I would not want a bride price.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jim, in this whole story, I actually did not know that when I told my fiance that I did not want a bride price, that he would actually agree to it. So it was a shock to me that he was like, "Oh, okay." And then, once he said okay, then we had to kind of go through with it. But I couldn't have made that decision without his support, and we couldn't have gone through what we did without him being kind of the backbone of saying, "Well, if you don't want one, then we won't ask for one."
Okay. Did you have sisters, and so was this a first experience in your family?
Well, I'm the only girl. I'm the only girl in my family. So,
okay.
and because I was sick with kidney disease and had a transplant, then my mom was really worried about me, and she wanted to ensure that my in-laws would love me and want me. So that's why she asked for a bride price. Yeah. That if my in-laws paid the bride price, then it would signify to her that they wanted to marry me, they wanted me in their family, and that they would love me and take care of me. So that was important to her.
And so when it came up to the time of your marriage, and you and your husband decided that you were not going to ask for the bride price, what was your mother's attitude?
Well, the attitude is that it is not my place to talk about it.
Your place?
It is not my place to talk about it, because I do not negotiate the bride price.
Okay.
The bride price is negotiated between marriage negotiators between the two families. And so it's not my place.
Talk about who negotiates the marriage.
So each family, when you marry a Hmong woman, then both sides have marriage negotiators, and the marriage negotiators then come to the bride's home with all of the entourage of the bride and the groom and their people, and then they negotiate, the bride price being one of them. But they negotiate other things like past grievances and things like that between family, between clans, not between the two couples. That's why she said, "Well, it's not your place." Basically, when I talked to my older brother about it, he said, "It's not your place to, Mom gets to decide that." Mm-hmm. So yeah. So even at my own wedding, I don't get to talk about it. I don't get to ask about it.
Yeah. So actually, there's a lot going on at this time of the negotiating. Because you're saying that. Sometimes if there are issues between the two clans mm-hmm. or between individuals within the clans, these things are worked out at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It probably has that benefit of smoothing over some things, getting some stuff out in the open and mm-hmm. so on. Mm-hmm. Where were you at the time that you were basically saying, I don't want the bride price, and so there mm-hmm. was no negotiation that went on?
Well, yeah. So I went to talk to my leaders, which was my pastor, mm-hmm. Not my uncles. I went to talk to my leaders in the church, and I said, at that time, Jim, I was of age. I mean, I was late 20s, so an old maid by all standards in the Hmong community, but I felt like I was old enough to decide how I wanted to be married.
Sure.
And I went to my church leaders and I said, this is how I want to get married. I want to get married in the church, in front of God and my two families, because we are Christians and this is what we do, But the complication here is that because my father died, and then my uncles are responsible for me. Mm-hmm. And the leaders that I went to were not my uncles. And so they felt slighted that, I did not go to them at this time of need and when they're supposed to do their job and take care of me and be in charge of, weddings and funerals and things like that. It feels like right off the bat, I was already wrong. That I didn't go to the right people. Not only did I talk about the bride price, which I shouldn't have done, I went to the wrong leaders to talk about it. My husband and I planned our church wedding, and we had the church wedding and none of my family members came because they said, well, you did not do the bride price first. They wanted me to do the bride price first and to do those Hmong things first. Mm. And we couldn't agree on anything, so we went ahead and we got legally married in the church. And no one came, no one from my family came, which was heartbreaking to me. And Jim, the thing is, they threatened that they wouldn't come, and I actually did not know that they wouldn't show up until they did not show up.
You thought that they wouldn't really carry through with it.
Well, I thought they would still come. I mean, I was under this American impression that, that love, unconditional love, that my family and my parents would still love me and would still come.
Family loyalty to you,
yes.
rather than loyalty to the broader, the broader clan and so on.
To tradition, to whatever. And so I think my Hmong girlfriends and I were under the impression that, they'll still come, until they didn't come. And then it was like, okay, yeah. So those are the consequences when you go against, some traditions that seemingly are very important to some Hmong people.
Well, you mentioned earlier that the bride price is just kind of almost like a junction where there are many factors, there are many issues that play here. It's not just slighting your uncles, but I think there were other consequences.
Yes.
What were some of the other consequences, like for your husband, and then for your social life, and so on?
So part of the reason why I wrote this book, Jim, was, you know, after we had gotten legally married, there were so many members that were so angry at me and upset, you know, and mostly I understood from my aunts and uncles that they were mad for my mom, that I had disrespected her, and I was not honorable, you know. I did not honor her with what I did, you know, and basically they told me I was stupid. I was a bad girl, I was stupid, what I did was wrong. And so I wrote the book to really discern what I did, like why did I do that, what was behind all of that, and was I really stupid and dumb, was that really a dumb decision that I had made? Because the consequences of that is that even after we'd been married for how many years and 2 kids later, there were still people talking to me and saying, "Oh, is that your boyfriend?" He said, but it was a slight. It was like, "Oh, because you didn't finish those traditional Hmong things. You didn't. Your in-laws didn't pay a bride price. You didn't finish the meal. You know, then he's not your husband. Then he's only a boyfriend."
Yeah.
You know, and you know, of course you smile and you're like, "Oh, Auntie, of course, you know, this is my husband." You know, but I wrote the book for myself and for young Hmong people to really grapple with what it means to be Hmong in America and these traditions. You know, it's like, how do you honor yourself and what you need and want and still be a good Hmong girl and still be true to your family and still be who you are? You know, I mean, the concept of being Hmong has changed, but a lot of older Hmong people will say there's a big Hmong with a, you know, capital H, you know, and I don't believe that's true. I think we have had to adapt wherever we have gone, you know, from China to Laos to here to America to survive. And some traditions have changed, and we need to change them. And I think the bride price is one of those things, you know. We don't need it. I believe that the intent of the bride price and the goals of the bride price can be done other ways. And it doesn't need to be an exchange of money. And this is like cold hard cash, Jim. It's not, it's thousands of dollars. You know, asking a young Hmong man who wants to marry a Hmong woman for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 or more, depending on the family, you know, because you're married a Hmong woman. And I cannot be paid in baht for.
Mai Neng, I wanted to ask you about your pastor, who in the book, it's very clear how much you depended upon him. And as you were saying, he became actually de facto your elder. But did he have? Did he warn you of what you might expect?
Jim, I think everyone else knew, like my husband knew, my pastor knew the consequences except me. I kept thinking that like there was some kind of compromise. I kept thinking that we could work it out. I kept thinking that like we could meet in the middle somewhere. You know, but with Hmong people, sometimes there's no compromise. It is always their way and never your way, you know. So I think he knew, you know, he certainly got in trouble with, you know, people in the congregation who were even mad at him. And then, of course, my uncles, you know, my uncles thought, oh, he was trying to steal another Hmong family, you know. And I think he was just doing his job as a pastor. You know, my family has been a member of the church since we came to the U.S. My mom made a decision early on to give up all the traditional stuff and to become a Christian. And so the church has become, the church is almost like a mega clan, right? That will take care of funerals and weddings. So they now take care of all the things that the clans usually would take care of. And so, you know, if you are a member of a church, then, you know, it's all these different clans that come together, and it's, like the church becomes the big clan that takes care of all these things. So of course it would be natural for me to go to my pastor to say, you know, I want to get married, you know, how do we do it, what's next, you know. But I think the issue of the bride price for the Hmong community is one that really shows the intersection between culture, what's tradition, and then also religion. Because if you're a Hmong Christian, then you have to decide, what are you going to do about all those traditional things that were usually done, as an animist, as a non-Christian? Do you give them up? Are they against God and, Jesus and the Holy Spirit? Or are they complementary to them? Do you continue doing the bride price? Do you continue doing, shamanistic rituals? Or even the rituals of New Year and tying the strings and calling back the spirits and things like that. And so you have to make a decision on these kind of things. And Jim, for Hmong people, sometimes you are Hmong first before you're a Christian, and being Hmong supersedes being a Christian. And so when it comes to sometimes these kind of issues, then you're Hmong first. And that part of you being Christian is thrown out the door because you were Hmong way before you were Christian.
At the time of the negotiation between the uncles on the two sides and then the feast that comes afterward, were there ceremonies, rituals, soul calling, shamanistic things at that time that you would feel uncomfortable with? Is that a part of the wedding arrangements and then the ceremony, the festival?
I think, Jim, when you are an animist Hmong, it starts even before that. So, as a young Hmong man, when you want to marry a Hmong woman, you take her into your house, and they do a ritual where they have to. I don't even know what it's called. So it's called lukai, which is like a blessing of the chickens, where they use a chicken to, kind of introduce the bride into the family. And I don't even know about it because my family does not do that. Sure. We're Christians, we don't do that.
But you were being taken into the ancestral side. You're being taken to the ancestors of the husband's side because you're going to belong to that side and that heritage.
Yeah, so it starts from day one of bringing your bride home and saying, I'm going to marry her, and then 3 days later there is a soul calling for the bride.
Explain soul calling.
Well, I will do my best. So, Jim, I'm just a writer. I'm not an anthropologist or a sociologist, but the tradition of the soul calling, Hmong people call it hupli, is a tradition that is a ritual that can be used for babies, for new brides, and my understanding is that 3 days after you bring the bride home, then you do a soul calling for her, and you have to have a shaman come and do this, but again, when you are a Christian, then in my church we did not do that. We don't need to do that because I don't know, I guess because my church saw those kind of rituals as being against God and Jesus and Holy Spirit, and you can only choose one God and one Spirit, so you have to, if you are a Christian, then you give up those things that are not complementary to being a Christian. So and I didn't even know that my in-laws didn't do that because I was not offended by it because I'm like, well, we don't do that, But the soul calling, is also done at Hmong New Year time. When you thank the spirit, you thank the ancestors for having protected the family, and there's other rituals where you ask them to protect you, and at the end of the year you have to pay them back. And it's usually with a meal of some sort, and you burn spirit paper money and all this stuff. But these are rituals that I don't even know about because my family does not do them, because we don't feel the need to do them anymore. So I'm probably not the best person to talk about it, but so I think earlier you asked, because my husband and I did not do the bride price, then we did not have negotiations we were not at the negotiations of the two families talking about it. They did have, there was a marriage negotiation.
But that came later, did it?
Well, it came kind of at the same time, but we were not there.
Okay.
And they negotiated, and my in-laws paid a bride price for me.
At the time before you were married in the church?
So after we were married in the church, they kept trying to get us to go to finish it and to go do to have the meal and things like that. But man, it's been a long time. So I think 9 months after we got legally married, there was a negotiation. The two sides, but my husband and I did not go. Because, I don't know, I assume you would need the bride and the groom at that negotiation. Apparently you do not. I think it's because we were already legally married. So my in-laws paid a bride price for me, and there was one last piece that was not done because we were not there, and that's the meal. Okay. So the meal is the public piece, I guess, that shows the community that you are married now, and they can call you, son-in-law, and all my uncles get to meet my husband and toast him and things like that. And so because we were not at the negotiating table, then the bride price was paid, but with a caveat that when things were better, that when the two young people were cooler, then there would be a meal done. And that meal got done how many years after we were legally married? 9 years.
So things then began to smooth out with respect to both sides, but there was a period of time, probably at the same time when people were saying, "Oh, is that your boyfriend?" that your husband was not given the title that would normally be given to the groom, and yes. So it was really a way of disrespecting.
I was living in sin. Though I was legally married, I was living in sin incurred among people, and
according to it was kind of Hmong sin.
Yes, Hmong sin. So my husband got his title of son-in-law when we finished the meal.
And only when you finish the meal.
Yeah, then, because my mom said, when you don't do this, we don't know what to call him, and I'm like, okay, and as with a lot of cultures, you don't call people by their name, you call them by their title. So son-in-law, mother-in-law,
that's right. Mm-hmm.
Mother, father. So, yeah, so, I have two different, I guess, wedding dates. I have a legal one and then I have a Hmong one,
Yeah.
But, Jen, the thing too is that when my husband ran for public office, and I went to my family to ask, which uncle should I talk to? How would they help me? Even though we had done the meal and, it was all good and done, they still remembered it. And they were still mad about it. They were still pissed about it. And my mom said, don't go ask them because they're not going to help you.
Did you believe her?
I did, because I was mad because I was like, "What? How many more years? I mean, we've done everything. We've paid a bride price. We've done the meal. I mean, what else is there to do? How many years are you gonna be mad at me for? And so she just said, when you did that, it said to the uncles that you don't need them."
Tell me about the relationship with your mother. This might be one of the most, in the book, one of the most painful things for the reader to see how punishing she was to you, and how did that work out, and how do you ever recover? How did you recover with her?
Yeah, so my mom's tough. I mean, I grew up just like not understanding why she never let me sleep at other people's houses, and she was not good at explaining things. And so, I didn't understand a lot of things. But, in writing this book, I really understood her deep love for me. Because as a mom now, I understand my deep love for my kids, and it is out of that. So you have to understand her from that perspective of her deep love for her daughter and what she wanted, and the fact that she wanted to ensure that my in-laws loved me in spite of kidney disease and a transplant and things like that. But of all the relationships, that was probably the most important relationship to me. And so I worked really hard to get back to her and to get back with her and to get back to her, I guess. So I would literally work, like after work, I would go to her garden and help her pick vegetables, and I would take my husband and we would go to the farmer's market and we would help her sell her vegetables. And even when we had kids, our kids were at the garden, at the farmer's market. So I think what really broke for both of us was really me having kids. And that the first time my mom came to my house was when I had my first child. And I guess if I had known that, I should have just had that first kid, right away, and right away 4 years. But, now with my kids, I mean, my mom's great. She's got a great relationship with my girls. She comes over to my backyard and we have a beautiful garden in the summertime. And, Hmong moms, I mean, the way they show you love is to give you stuff like, hey, do you need a bag of rice? It's like, of course I don't need a bag of rice. I mean, I can buy a bag of rice, but if you want to give me a bag of rice, I'll take it. So, we've got, and my mom and I have always been close. As the only daughter, we did a lot of things together. And I think that's why what I did was so painful for her, because I really deeply wounded her and she was really hurt, by all the stuff that I was doing and the fact that I didn't understand what she was doing and I insisted on what I was doing, was painful for her, But I think we're in a good place now, My mom, as a good Christian, I think has forgiven me for what I've done, and hopefully, we can only rebuild a relationship as mother and daughter going forward.
Sure. I did want to explore a little bit with you about Christian virtues and values as playing a role in this, because it went on for quite a long time.
Yes.
Where there wasn't forgiveness. And there wasn't reconciliation. What do you see in maybe in the experience of other people? What would you say about the importance of emphasizing Christian values as dealing with these kind of very deep cultural impasses?
Oh gosh, I mean, the values of honoring your mother and father, it's a value that Hmong people have too. So yeah, that's a common value. But there are impasses. There are places where I think you're Hmong first before you're Christian, and so I think the church really needs to grapple with what does it mean to be a Hmong person who's Christian, and when does Christianity supersede being Hmong, So I think those are kind of the common struggles of the church now, trying to still be Hmong and be Christian.
Yeah.
And I don't have any easy answers, because I think I'm not grounded enough in the Hmong traditions to say, no, we have to keep this or we have to do this. I think I'm of the generation that grew up here in the U.S., that is more Hmong American than my mom. So it's probably easier for me to adapt. I know my husband's Catholic, and, Catholicism seems to be more permissible in terms of allowing some of these rituals to be interpreted differently and to still be practiced but framed differently.
Yes.
So the soul calling stuff, maybe it's not framed soul calling, but maybe it's, you know, a welcome for the bride or the new kid, or, you know, and bringing the church members to sing hymnals and to do a meal instead, you know. So I feel like the more permissible Catholicism is, the better it works for Hmong people, you know, and you know, and there's a history of this with other cultures and other groups of people as well. But, you know, in my church, you know, they were very strict. They were, you know, being a Christian is against all these traditional Hmong things, and if you are Christian, then you don't do those things. And while we can go and support our relatives when they have those rituals, you know, oh, you can't eat the food or you can't do certain things. So I feel like Hmong people are all over the place. I think we're still trying to figure it out.
Sure.
You know, how do we negotiate these things and be Hmong and be Christian?
Yeah.
And be true to, you know, what Christ is calling us to do, you know, and to be.
Yeah. Let me go to kind of a final topic here. The bride price, one of these issues of honor and shame. You can honor or you can shame. What are a couple of other hot button issues for Hmong when it comes to honor and shame? I think we've talked a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think, you know, the issue of honor and shame is interesting to me because, you know, you shame your family when you don't do what they want, when you are not follow a tradition and some of those cultural rules. And so I think some of the other issues are like the issue of divorce, you know, what happens in divorce situations, because when a Hmong woman marries, she takes on the spirits of her in-laws and her husband. But when she divorces, you know, she divorces those spirits too. And so she doesn't have any place to belong. She doesn't have any place to be. And the issue for Hmong people is the afterlife. Where do you go? Where does your spirit get sent to? Who sends your spirit where? You know, and so divorced Hmong women, I feel like, are always looking for a place to die. You know, a place where they can die, where their spirits can be sent into, you know, after they're dead. And so you would think that for Christians, it wouldn't matter, this issue wouldn't matter anymore because, you know, they should all be one faith, right? God and Jesus and Holy Spirit. And so there shouldn't be this issue of, you know, oh, can I come back and die in my family's house, you know? Because I'm not going to offend their spirits anymore, right? But I don't know, for Hmong people, I think it's still an issue of what to do with divorced Hmong women, you know. And then I think the other issue is, you know, having kids out of wedlock. You know, again, you know, if you're animist Hmong and you have a child out of wedlock, you can't be in the house. You can't give birth in your family's home, because you're going to offend the household spirits, and you're going to offend, you know, and it's going to have all these like dire consequences and things like that. And so, what do you do? You know, if you're a young Hmong woman in Laos or in the villages, you know, I mean, how horrible. You know, I mean, here in the U.S., you know, supposedly there are resources to help you and things like that. But what do you do? And so again, if you're Christian, then this shouldn't matter because you are of the same faith. You know, there shouldn't be any feelings of like offending the household spirits and all that stuff because you're all of God. But I think it's still an issue in the Hmong community because, again, I think sometimes you are Hmong first, you know, and, you know, our parents sometimes have these deep-seated feelings that they kind of forget that, oh, we're all Christian, this should not matter, it's okay. So who knows? I mean, some of those things I think will continue to be worked out, with the church.
Sure. And it does seem like that this is an open door for the church to minister to women who have the experience of divorce or have the experience of being an unwed mother. The appeal could be that if you know Jesus Christ, you belong to the family of God, and we will take you in, and you will be our family. And so it would seem like that this is an open door for Christian ministry to Hmong women who are disenfranchised, who are excluded, who now no longer have a place in the afterlife, but with Jesus and the gospel, they do have a place. Well, Mai Neng, you have helped me a great deal, and I hope that it will help others, and I think it will. I appreciate so much you taking time to be with me this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.